Hello and welcome to another show of In the Green. Our guest today is Rich Robinson from the Michigan Campaign Finance Network. Welcome, Rich. And,
thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show. I see the Campaign Finance Network has put together this report, More Money, Less Disclosure, an overview of Michigan's 2000 state elections. What is this document?
Well, it's a research and summary document on the 2000 elections. It was considerable toil to put the thing together because of the nature of campaign finance records. But what it does is put together the big picture of how contemporary political campaigns are funded in Michigan. And there are pieces of information here that I think are probably news to a lot of people.
So are campaigns funded with $5 and $10 contributions from individual citizens?
Well, that's not the case. And interestingly, I mean, since you've given me that bait, I'll say that's the one bit of campaign finance reform that was passed by the last legislature, was to make it so those $5 and $10 contributions have to be reported. Previously, anything up to $20, which made it easy for a small contributor to give, and it made it less of a bureaucratic snag to file reports. Well, all those small contributions have to be reported, and they almost become a bigger hassle than they're worth. But the other side of that is, where does the money come from? The money comes in big chunks. In the competitive elections, most of the money comes from the parties, and they raise their money in large chunks. It's kind of wholesale fundraising, wholesale funding of campaigns.
And the parties, you're talking about the two major parties, the Democrats.
That's right. I really am talking about the two major parties, and that's a limitation of this report, is we really did focus on the two major parties, and that's where the fundraising goes on, honestly.
Okay, and that's one of the reasons why In the Green exists, is to bring out the alternative views to the two major parties. And there are people in the existing parties who support campaign finance reform, right? It's just not an overwhelming...
That's true. At this point, it hasn't become a majority issue, I don't think, to take meaningful action. But then again, I think that we've maybe broken some new ground with this report and bringing together the picture of what's wrong and what can be done about it, because it's not a hopeless situation. I mean, there really are identifiable problems and solutions that can be articulated.
Good. Well, let's talk about those problems. Can you identify some of those for our viewers?
Well, one of the certainly a great example, and an example for which Michigan honestly has become infamous, is the case of our Supreme Court elections in fall 2000. In the first place, what the candidates' campaign committees raised themselves increased dramatically by 83% from just 2 years before. In 1998, the average Supreme Court candidate raised $680,000 for their campaign committees. This time, the average was $1.1 million.
Wow.
Now, in addition to that, the Republican State Committee contributed $420,000 on average to each of its three nominated candidates. The Democratic State Central Committee is not showing that kind of party-independent expenditure, and that leads to an interesting aspect of the whole Supreme Court campaign. It appears as though the bigger part of the whole campaign action, most of the money was actually off the books, not reported by any candidate committee, not reported by either party. And that invites a question in itself, I'm sure. But if you want to talk about the money first, just what the candidates raised.
Right, and you had a graph of part of this?
Yeah, let me put this up so your viewers can take a look at it. This shows the fundraising of the average successful Supreme Court candidate since 1994. And you see that in 1994, that average was $286,000. Well, from 94 to 96, it increased by about 50%. Then from 96 to 98, nearly doubled to $750,000. to a point where in 2000 the average successful campaign raised almost $1.3 million. So it's quadrupled.
Wow.
In 4 election cycles
That's
from
amazing.
just 1994.
And I claim that's the reason why I didn't win that race in 1998, because I was in there as a Reform Party candidate, actually.
Well, it's difficult to have your message heard when this kind of money is buying carpet bombing campaigns, advertising
That's amazing.
campaigns.
In fact, I didn't accept any contributions during that campaign. I was trying to use it as a forum to explain part of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
But without a lot of money or a lot of publicity, we didn't get too far, and that's why we have the show. And that's why you're here to talk about these issues. It's amazing that the way the whole Supreme Court system is set up in Michigan, and I know there's some consideration now of changing it, but where candidates are nominated by the parties, but then run on a nonpartisan basis. But the parties are allowed to make independent, what are called independent expenditures,
right?
That would help those candidates. Now, I don't know whether can they mention the name of the candidate and support that person and say, vote for this justice?
Well, yes, and their independent expenditures, they certainly can do that. But that kind of leads to the next line of campaign strategy that we haven't talked about yet, and that's that off-the-books campaigning. And the way that all works is...
Just so you know, in each of these major campaigns, there appears to be the winners had $1.5 million plus on the books.
Oh, absolutely. On the books. Over $1.5 million. That's right.
So in addition to that, now tell us about the off-the-books.
Well, the off-the-books part of it went like this. If you do not make an explicit statement of support for or opposition to a candidate, if you don't say, vote for Matt Abel, vote against Matt Abel, but you say, Matt Abel, he's got our values, he'll work hard for us, that doesn't have to be reported in a campaign finance report because it's considered to be issue advocacy rather than electioneering. Now, the fallacy about that test is this. Candidates' own ads in 2000 don't say vote for me, vote against the other guy. They say the same thing. Matt Abel, he's got our values. He'll work hard for us. So what this does is simply allow issue advertising to pay for the campaign. Now, the hook here is issue advertising is not considered to be election activity, so it can be funded in the party's administrative accounts. The parties have political accounts for both federal offices and state offices, but they have this administrative account for non-election activities, and we're sitting here grinning about the fact that these ads aren't election activity.
And what they say, that's for get out the vote activity,
well,
for voter registration?
They don't even make that
education?
pretense because that account doesn't report to the Secretary of State and it doesn't report to the Federal Election Commission.
They used to call those slush funds.
Well, the Federal Election Commission can audit it, but there's no requirement for it to report. Now, there's another interesting aspect besides the fact that it doesn't report. In the political accounts that the parties maintain, corporations nor unions can make direct Treasury contributions to those accounts. They're prohibited from that. They have to first set up a PAC. They go and raise money, give it to the PAC, and then the PAC can give money to the party. But in the administrative accounts, corporations and unions can give directly Treasury money to those accounts. So what you've got is a perfect black hole. There's no restriction on who can participate, there's no limit on what they can give, and there's no reporting of it, all because they didn't use those magic words, vote for or vote against. This is what I call the loophole big enough to drive a campaign through. And until this issue ad loophole is closed, we're not going to be anywhere near full disclosure of who's participating in these political campaigns. And again, in the Supreme Court case now, the conventional wisdom is that the overall cost for the 3 seats was $16 million. Well, between the candidate committees and the party independent expenditure, we can account for $8.1 million of that. The other half is not reported anywhere. So that's how far away from full disclosure we are. And again, I want to emphasize the point, no prohibition on participation by anyone. Corporations come on in, unions come on in, no reporting. This is an imminent danger to representative democracy as far as I'm concerned, and many others who work with us on this issue.
This is specifically on Supreme Court races we're talking about.
Well, this is specifically about the Supreme Court.
But it's amazing because they're the ultimate determinant of what is the law and what's true and just and what's proper in society. And many people, I argue, that there are extreme conflicts of interest. There are people who are litigants before the court who are making contributions both on the books and off the books.
Absolutely, and that really gets to the fundamental problem. I mean, as we've said, it's not just the volume of money, but it's the fact that these Supreme Court candidates went to special interests of various types and asked for those kinds of contributions. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting anything like they send out an invoice for services rendered after the fact or anything like that. But I think those contributions can be seen as an economic investment, and the contributors are looking for a return on their investment. And as long as that perception is allowed to live by the fact that we have Supreme Court candidates going out soliciting contributions, I think there is a serious question about the impartiality and the independence of the bench. So that invites a solution, and coincidentally, the week after we released this report, the Standing Committee on Judicial Independence of the American Bar Association released a report calling for full public funding of all judicial elections. We think that would be a very good idea. Get Supreme Court candidates out of this business of going out raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars from interests of various types. Give them the chance to be truly impartial and independent.